Okay, we are live, but we got to let it breathe just for a moment while we bring on these mythical meta people. Just kidding, they're not mythical. They're real. We've met a lot of them. They're real people and we love them. Get Instagram rolling and we're good. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, returned from a fun week in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. And with me, as always, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him, Zack Kelberman. Zack, first things first, how are you, brother? And did you even watch any of the Senior Bowl? Because I only watched a little bit of it myself.
I hope you're doing better, Chad. I know you're a little under the weather. It's been a lot of travel lately, but I'm doing good. I didn't watch the actual game. I don't think anyone really does, Chad. I did read the practices in the lead up to the game, all the stuff that you and Scott put out there for MHH. So a lot of interesting Broncos related nuggets we can get into tonight for sure.
I think honestly, it's the first time I watched any of the Senior Bowl in, at least 5 or 6 years. And the only reason I even watched it is just the intrigue to see some of these players that caught my eye and Scott over the week to see how they acquitted themselves in the actual game. But it's really a bizarre thing because the same goes for the Shrine Bowl, maybe to a slightly lesser extent, but media flies in from all over the fruited plain, all over the world. They watch the practices, and then 2 days before the game, everybody bails. After the last practice is over, everybody bails. And there's a reason for that. More emphasis from a scouting perspective, the teams, all that is on the actual practices. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon, but it was cool. David, what's up, bro? Thank you for the super chat, big dog. Great to see you tonight. Thank you for dropping one before we even went live, dude. It means a lot to us. He says, David, my question is, what do you guys think about Pat Surtain wanting to play both sides, receiver, cornerback? Your thoughts? Yeah, I wrote this up the other day at the Pro Bowl. No, he was talking. It's within the Pro Bowl news cycle thing, but Surtain was talking to, I think, Kay Adams up in Adams, and she was bringing up the Travis Hunter Zach phenomenon. Being a bona fide, not just playing both ways, but starring both ways. And she's like, "Could you ever see yourself doing that?" He's like, "Yeah, why not?" To me, it came off as a little bit more kind of like, yeah, you're asking me, so I'm going to give you like this kind of an answer. But I don't think, David, he's seriously trying to campaign to the Broncos, hey, yo, I want to play receiver. Although I can pull up his transcript, what he said, he thinks he'd be pretty cool at it, and I'm sure he would. But, Zach, you got somewhere close to $100 million invested in him as a shutdown corner. So how much do you want to expose him to NFL wide receiver violent collisions?
Yeah, I don't want to expose them all that much, Chad. And I feel like this is a conversation that's been resurfaced. We talked about this like a year ago or whatever when the two-way PS2 conversation was happening. And it would be cool to see, and I have no doubt he has enough skill to pull it off. But I don't want to risk the best cornerback in the NFL, the Broncos, franchise defensive cornerstone, for a couple trick plays on offense.
Well, look, I remember Dion having a little bit of a run with it, obviously in college, but in the pros with Dallas and maybe one or two other stops, but it's very short term. The NFL, they want guys to specialize, and who knows, maybe Hunter will become that new, forerunner, so to speak, that changes that game. But I have a sneaking suspicion that sometime within the first 2 years he's in the league, he'll specialize one way or the other. But I'm also reminded of like Champ Bailey when the Broncos first acquired him via trade. Mike Shanahan running him in motion and little fake things to like just throw the defense off. They didn't give him a ton of touches, but they put him out there to run a few routes at first and then, hey, go play cornerback. So I don't know. I don't expect anything whatsoever, David, to come of it, even though, as Zach said, I think Surtain he's a stud athlete. I think he would succeed. He understands the game. He has to stop it. So he knows everything there is to know about the route trees, tells, technique, all those things he knows, and he has the athleticism, Zach, to duplicate it. But if you're the Broncos, that juice, even though you have needs at receiver, not worth the squeeze.
Exactly. What are you going to get, like a 20-yard completion or something, or so take the defense by surprise for a few yards? But the downside to that is you might risk a serious injury to, again, your best defensive player. I have no doubt he has the ball skills, Chad. He could probably catch a pass, but it's just go get an actual wide receiver to use on offense. Don't use your best cornerback in that role.
David, great to see you, big dog. Because she's coming off the top rope, we have the Duchess, Michaela Parker.
Thank you, Michaela.
Elbow first, kaboom. Thank you so much, Michaela. Love you, appreciate you. Means the world to us, especially this time of year. You know, news cycle slows down. Every little bit helps us keep the lights on. So thank you so much. There's a reason why you are MHH family, and you know this, Michaela. She says, "Hola, guys. What's the only thing about us getting what is the only thing about us getting Mark Andrews for a couple years and getting Genty in the first? Draft Scatterbo in later rounds and let him develop." Okay, so Zach, I think she's asking, hey, what about going and getting Mark Andrews? Which, by the way, I still feel bad for that dude. Man, he took a pillaring for that one drop in their playoff loss, Baltimore. But Genty is more and more, Zach, looking like he's going to be long gone by 20. So if you want him, you're going to have to trade up, and you really want to trade up for a running back. And so she's offering an alternative here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if they want to bypass tight end in round one and explore a trade for Mark Andrews, still a great player who probably has, as Michaela says here, a couple years left. But from what I know about him, I mean, he has a couple injury concerns. He also has a really high cap number, so the Broncos would be absorbing that. I would rather them just draft their own tight end, Chad, be on a cost-controlled contract. And I'm not sure if Michaela's saying instead of drafting Genty, then you draft Scatterbo in the later rounds. But if they go for Genty in the first, they're not going to double up with Scatterbo in the later rounds. If one or the other. But Michaela, they're both fantastic running backs, and you have to make it a point of emphasis to build a backfield around Bo Nix. Either one, no matter where the Broncos draft him, would help this offense.
I got to tell you, look, there's a lot more to the draft class, obviously, than the seniors. You've got a lot of interesting underclassmen at that, Zach, that are going to get drafted, and in many cases higher than some of these seniors. But I saw some really good, interesting talent at the Senior Bowl at the running back position, which we'll get into more tonight. So I don't think the Broncos really need to be compulsive in how they approach round one. In fact, the more you're hearing, Zach, guys like Colston Loveland, Ty Warren, and Genty getting mocked well before the Broncos go on the clock, the more I start going, hey, man, they might trade out of the first round. It wouldn't shock me. But Michaela, love you so much. Thank you for the very generous super chat. You know we love you. Papa Bear also is checking in. What's up, David, the Papa Bear McElrath? Thank you, brother. Throwing down a super as well before we even went live. We're blessed to have you, big dog. He says, good evening, Broncos country. Hashtag God bless the USA. Hashtag let's go, Bo. Yeah, speaking of Bo, Zach, kind of interesting that he ended up as an alternate, guys bowing out, being offered to go participate in the Pro Bowl games. And I know we've discussed this on the show, the various MHH shows over the last week, but he passed because he had an undisclosed procedure Zach, on an undisclosed body part. Right. Do you really think it wasn't his back that they cleaned up, quote unquote?
I would assume it was. That was the injury, the 3 transverse fractures that he had, Chad. But that's what they're saying, is that it was a different, unrelated to that back injury. And so it goes. It was a voluntary procedure, it sounds like, that he wanted to get done ASAP, as opposed to stretching it out and missing any part of the offseason program.
That was Peyton Manning's lament. Hey, man, yeah, I would have liked to have seen Bo. I wish Bo Nix could. Not Bo Nix should have. It was, I wish Bo Nix could have made it, because he would want to hang out, obviously, with Bo. And then the opportunity Bo would have to kind of rub elbows with the top quarterbacks of the AFC. It's not easy to earn those opportunities in a Pro Bowl setting, and that would have been nice for him. But first things first, if there is procedures that have to take place, the sooner you get to them in the offseason, the more, Zach, you can hedge against the possibility of any complications or setbacks that would delay you being a hundo for OTAs, training camp. So Bo Nix, basically, guys, he chose you. He chose Broncos country, taking care of himself so that he can take care of Broncos country. The Ronk checking in. What's up, dude? Instead of getting that nice little Pro Bowl on his resume, he chose Broncos country. Great to see you, Mike. He says, good evening, Chad and Zach on the Mile High Huddle podcast. Go Bo Broncos. Great to see you, big dog. I've missed you. I've missed all y'all. Hope I've spent time around Scott. You'll hear y'all all the time. You know, I guess that's kind of a Southern thing too, but I've missed all of y'all. You know what I'm saying? Max Rio up in Canada. What's good, bro? Evening, gents and Broncos country. Thank you, bro. MHH for life. What D linemen and linebackers stood out to you? Really good question. And it was a complete 100% educational crash course based solely on what I was seeing. And then, of course, you know, see something Scott, who's much more educated on covering the college game and the draft, bringing me up to speed. But I came out of there feeling a lot better about my understanding, at least of the senior class, right? And I'll get up to speed better, too, on the underclassmen. But the one guy I'll point to on the D-line that was just like, whoa, was Darius Alexander. He's a real guy, so to speak. And he projects as a hand in the dirt guy at the next level. Linebackers, the Florida kid, I'm trying to remember his name. Hold on, it'll come to me one second. Dang it, Shamar James. He popped to me. And you know what? I'm filming plays. And that Notre Dame off-ball linebacker had himself a couple of nice things. So there's some options just in the senior class. I think the Broncos, Zach, will be able to find plenty of good options because those are D-line, linebacker, safety. Those are the three defensive positions. Scott's got some stuff for us here. This is the guy. And when you see him stand, and this is Alexander, when you see him, for those who are listening after the fact, we're watching a few clips that Scott shot while we were there of practice. And when you just see him standing there, you go, oh, that's a dude. And then sure enough, it translates to the production in these one-on-one drills. And conversely, there was other guys that you looked at him, you go, that looks like a guy chiseled out of stone. You know, that looks like your veritable Greek god. Look like Tarzan, though, play like Jane. You're like, really? That's all that guy brings to the table? Like 40 right there is one of those examples. But look at this guy. And by the way, he's going against Gray Zabel there, who is one of the quickest risers coming out of the Senior Bowl, that interior lineman from North Dakota State. But look at this guy, Zach 9. He's just a beast. But I don't know exactly where his stock has him falling, but that's one guy that really popped.
Yeah, I was thinking about this when we were answering Michaela's question about Mark Andrews, is that if you fill a bunch of these needs before the draft, obviously you can put yourself in a situation where you go true best player available at 20 or wherever the Broncos are picking. And that best player might not be, as much as we want it to be, a tight end, a running back, or a receiver. Defensive line, linebacker, safety, those are all almost equally as big of needs for the Broncos this offseason, Chad. So I would caution anyone in Broncos country not to be totally surprised if on draft night they're building up the trenches or the defensive back end, for example, instead of the offense.
Amen to that, guys. So much more to get to. But first, we got to talk to you about Underdog. The best app for your big game party is actually on your phone. It's called Underdog, and it is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the big game coming up. Which players are going to go off? Which ones are going to go ice cold? Make your entries in just a few taps.
And with their pick'em game, you can win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and more. They've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. Create entries with all football picks or mix and match across your other favorite sports. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want.
That's right. I can't tell you, seriously, how much fun I've had playing Underdog, and you can too. Download the Underdog app today. Use code MHuddle to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, download the Underdog app today. Use our code MHuddle to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly.
Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concern with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
All right, back to the conversation we go. Okay, I'm just catching up on a couple little messages from Mr. Producer. David Youngkin jumping in again. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, David.
Is there any news on the coaching position? I'll put a little S around it. And it's kind of on the same topic here. Byron Lewis also jumping in with a super. So thank you, man. Really appreciate you. Any word on comp picks we could get from the coaches we lost? Do you think any teams would bite on Zach Wilson to give us a comp pick? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking on the Zach Wilson, but Vance Joseph didn't go anywhere. I'm trying to think. Chris Banjo, I don't think well, he did take a coordinator position, but not a head coach. So those comps are I believe, Zach, reserved for minority coaches taking head coaching positions, which the Broncos had several guys move on to coordinator gigs, but not head coach.
Yeah, and GMs and head coaches is where the comp diversity thing kicks in there. And I think Byron's asking about Zach Wilson. He's going to be a free agent. I think if he's asking if Zach Wilson gets signed, would the Broncos get a comp pick? And no, I don't think they will, if only because their own signings will cancel out whatever they could get. So no comps, I think, coming the Broncos' way this year.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. What will the Broncos do at backup? It's a low-grade need, but a need nonetheless. Will they prioritize one of those two guys, Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson? And if so, which one? I think it would probably be Stidham. But then again, they carried Wilson on the roster the entire season. I think with Zach, the goal of hopefully getting like a serious trade offer at the deadline, but nothing really came out on the wash. Byron Lewis again, brother. Cam Scatterbo is that potential joker in the second round. Hundo. Yeah, dude, he could be. He's a stud. And it's either 51 or 52 the Broncos hold in overall. So that second round pick, they might end up taking, for example, today Eric Trickle published a post Senior Bowl mock draft at MHH. Go read it, guys, milehighhuddle.com. And I'll spoil one of the picks, and that is he had the Broncos taking that North Dakota State interior offensive lineman I was talking about earlier, Gray Zabel, at number 20. So if you do something, Zach, outside, if the Broncos, for whatever reason, the board falls a certain way, they solve certain needs in free agency that they decide to maneuver a little differently in round one, defensive line, offensive line, those are possibilities, but they're low end. Scatterbo in the second round would be a solid pick if he's there.
The Broncos can control what they can control, like free agency. If they want to solve some holes on defense or tight end, whatever, Chad, and open them up for the draft, that's one thing. But they can't dictate how the draft board falls. And the good thing is this draft class is so deep with running backs and tight ends specifically that you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into a round one selection. If they want to wait, they can get a good player in round 2, 3, etc.
The Duchess jumping in again with another top rope.
Thank you.
Super chat. Love you, Michaela. So much. Thank you. She says, sorry, I've been gone for a few days. We are rumored to make a play for Talanoa Hufanga. I always botch his name. He's a stud. Get a tight end and a running back in the draft. Now, Zach, you, if I'm not mistaken, had that write-up for us last week while we were in Mobile. Broncos being linked one way or another to Hufanga. What do you make of it, and your thoughts here for the Duchess, who love you, Michaela?
Yeah, thank you so much, Michaela, as always. I talked about this on Thursday's show when I was solo, Chad. I think it was PFF that said the Broncos are in a deal landing spot for Hufanga. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I messed that up, too, the first time. Who would be a great, he's 25 years old. He was a former All-Pro, former Pro Bowler. He's only played in 17 games over the last 2 seasons because of injuries, so that's a concern. But he would be, Michaela, a massive upgrade on PJ Locke next to Brandon Jones in that back end. So if they can do it, and if he's not wants too much money or too expensive, I would love for them to take care of one need in free agency, Chad, and again, free them up to go elsewhere in the draft.
I could see him doing wondrous things alongside Brandon Jones. And frankly, Zach, you could have your cake and eat it too. You wouldn't necessarily have to move on from PJ Locke if you brought on Hufanga, but it would relegate Locke back to Zach, what is probably his natural best role, which is that third safety. You bring him in big nickel situations where he can kind of play more like a dime backer, right? He's more of a linebacker. He's more your Will Parks guy instead of being exposed over and over and over again on the back half of the field in coverage. That was not his strong suit. And scheme-wise, it's not really Brandon Jones's strong suit either. So they need a guy. I mean, although he held up much better than PJ, the Broncos need a guy who can bring the physical and who can play a little single high and cover that literal Zach last line of defense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Spot Track projected about $13 million annually for Hufanga on the open market. PJ Locke, if released, Chad, would clear about $4 million for the Broncos. So I am of the mind where I'm cutting Locke in that scenario. I'm taking that money and I'm giving it directly to his replacement, Hufanga, in this instance.
But guys, start wrapping your brain a little bit around the possibility of the Broncos preempting the center situation. Now, they have already one of the top 10 highest paid offensive lines in the NFL. They've got 4 of the 5 spots basically solved, right, for the next few years. But center is the weak link. And even though, Zach, we know they like Luke Wattenberg, and for whatever reason, Alex Forsythe seems to be still kind of a emotional favorite as a depth guy on the back end. He must bring a lot to the table on the intangible side of things. But start wrapping your brain around this guy. This is Gray Zabel's, Mr. Producer. Let's check him out. This is that North Dakota State kid that, frankly, I didn't even know who he was till we showed up. And we would just watch him at just one SEC dude or one like just way above his weight class in terms of school level of competition. He would just handle him. He's in the green helmet, all right, in the red jersey. Now just watch him. He just stonewalls him. What if that was your center? Bo Nix, no interior pressure because he's got Quinn Miners on one side. He's got Ben Powers on the other. And you're going to see a lot of these reps. I mean, look at that, dude. That's a big boy he's holding up there. You're going to see a lot of these reps he's playing guard. But here he is at center. So watch him at center. Bam, push back a little, but holds his own, doesn't let him get by. Ball's gone. Right, ball's gone in 2 seconds in the league. So that's a win for 77. Here he is one more time at right guard. And these are some of the funnest things to observe during practice when the big guys go at each other. And it can get intense, baby. It can get intense. But Zabel, huge riser. One more at center, too. Check him out. I mean, he's got the – see, just pushed him, just moved him around the horn. He's just like, you're out of here, as Scott likes to say. Get out the club. Goodbye. You know, that would have moved your quarterback a little bit, that one there off his spot, but still, he's not getting to him. He's not getting to him. So a couple other ones. He was also a piece of news here. He was named the Senior Bowl overall practice player of the week by the NFL executives who voted from all 32 teams. So you want to take your pick at the biggest riser coming out of the Senior Bowl, Zach. It's definitely Gray Zabel.
What's nice about him, too, is that even if you don't plug him in at center right away, you have a backup option you're molding at guard, as you mentioned. If you want to get out from Ben Powers next year, whenever his contract allows, you have a built-in successor. Or center, like you were talking about, that is the weakest link. I like what Wattenberg brought to the table, Chad. I felt he outkicked his coverage athletically wise, but he still wasn't exactly what you need there. And I liken him to an Audric Estime, where it's a middle round talent. It's not the blue chip stud at that position, and he did his best, but you still want to have more of an elite player at that spot that you don't have to worry about. Set and forget center, and I think Zabel can be that.
To me, it really, as much as I like Zabel, Zach, the idea of him, he's basically going to be a first-round guy. And the problem I have with Zabel as far as Denver, scheme, none of that. Dude, scheme is not a concern with guys like him. He'll go kick ass anywhere he plays, but is at what cost? Meaning, like, what are you foregoing? Who's on the board? At some of these other kind of more pressing spots that the Broncos find themselves in need of. So definitely got to watch. I mean, if the Broncos drafted Zabel, dude, even if it came at the expense of, there was maybe a running back I kind of liked there or whatever, I'm not looking the gift horse in the mouth. That dude, Zach, is I mean, you want to talk about Sean Payton's philosophy of building a roster from the offensive line out. You've now got your quarterback of the future locked in. I mean, basically a Pro Bowler in year one, a historic season as a rookie. And that would give you no problems, dude. You'd be solved at O-line for the next at least 2 seasons probably. But, yeah, that dude, it's easy to sit and talk about Zabel after watching him just crush it for 3 straight days.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a running back, but he would help the running game. He's not a receiver, but he would help give Bo Nix a little more time to find a receiver. He would help out the offense. And we talk about improving Bo Nix's supporting cast. That's the position we don't mention is center. Like you talked about, Chad, it's like the weak link that goes unheard of. This is time to speak out about it and time to consider that again. It might be defense, it might be offense, but the Broncos leave themselves a wide range of possibilities as to where they go. And I'll tell you, it wouldn't be my first choice, but if Zabel was the pick, like you, Chad, I'm not crying about that.
And by the way, Scott, he says, Scott's been going every year to the Senior Bowl. This was year 5 in a row for him. And he says that was as good a week of interior line play as he can remember seeing in those 5 years. So it's some interesting options if the Broncos want to dip into that, let's say somewhere in the first 3 or 4 rounds. But Zach, real quick, guys, any specific questions you have, hit us up on what we saw at the Senior Bowl, and we'll do our best to take care of it. Glenn Ashley, though, I want to grab this. Glenn, very supportive. Great to see you. Good afternoon, Chad, Zach, Deacon Scott, Broncos Country. How have your opinions changed since visiting? Any climbers, any suggested selections changed based on performance? MHH for life, state of being. Yeah, dude. So we just talked about Zabel. We talked about Alexander. We talked about Shamar James. The other guy that I got to admit Scott kind of swung me on, but it didn't take much. He just brought him to my attention, is Jarquez Hunter from Auburn, the running back. And it's really interesting because in the game itself, he didn't even get a carry. He caught a few passes, but he didn't even get a carry. But watching him in practice, you go back to that phrase I just said, get out the club, where when he's in pass protection and he's dealing with an edge or somebody coming in, they're not getting through him. He's stacked. He's got ridiculous balance. The way he runs, he's like leaning forward the whole time, and he's like a pinball, and he runs hard. My only question about him is his speed. Like, how fast is he? And we'll find out at the combine. And Zach and I will be there at the end of the month. That'll be a lot of fun. But that's a guy I want you guys to start thinking about as a possibility, is Auburn running back Jarquez Hunter. Really interesting player. Do you have any of him, Scott? By the way, do you have any cut-ups of him yet? Okay, that's all right. But yeah, Zach, that's a guy too, man. Check him out.
Yeah, that's what's so good. Again, if you don't get the top-ranked running back on your board in the first round, you could get a potential starting caliber player. And as deep as the 6th or even the 7th rounds, we know how good the Broncos scout on drafted free agents. This is such a deep draft class that coincides with the Broncos' biggest need. So they're very fortunate there. And I'll co-sign you, Chad. It's a player the Broncos country should keep an eye on, or an ear out for.
Dude, he catches the ball real well. He runs smooth routes. Now, it's a little bit of a fugazi, however you want to say it. Depends on where you're from in the country. But when these running backs, they go into it's kind of individual drills, but it'll be running backs and linebackers. And there'll be a quarterback that'll rotate in and out. The quarterbacks rotate from throwing receiver on corner. They'll go through, and then they'll hop behind the other side of the 50 and go running back on linebacker. And it's not exactly fair to the linebackers, because running backs, without any help, these linebackers have to just stick with these guys. So you see a lot of them, these running backs, when they're running these individual routes on these linebackers in individual kind of, they kind of cheat, double moves, this and that. And for a linebacker trying to cover and like he's the only defender on the field, it's very rare that, I don't care who the linebacker is, when you have the entire field, no help around you, and a running back's just choosing to throw double moves on you left and right. I don't care who you are, you're going to get juked. But watching Jarquez Hunter, dude, he caught passes left and right, smooth route runner. He's just one of those guys I could see having himself a nice career. We ran into one of, who was it? Was it the 24/7 Sports Publisher on Auburn? I think it was. Anyway, it doesn't matter who it was. We ran into a guy who covers Auburn every day. All right. And he's like, on the subject of Jarquez Hunter, he's like, yeah, dude, he's a guy who'll get drafted in the 5th round, play in the league for 12 years. That's true. He's that guy. Book it. So why not do that in Denver?
And we're all assuming that Sean Payton wants the fastest guy or the flashiest guy, when in reality, he probably wants a 5-tool running back, an old baseball analogy there, meaning a guy who can catch, who can run, who can pass protect, who can do it all. And it's that determination, I think, Chad, that's going to lead the Broncos to taking whoever running back they land on.
Well, and the other thing, and I we were asked, so I'm telling you, but the last thing here on Hunter is he's got relatively low tread wear on his tires. He had a prolific season. Over 1,400 yards rushing this past year at Auburn, but not that many carries. What he averaged, like 7.5, Scott, something like that, 8. He didn't touch the ball all that much. So the biggest thing that comes to mind, like, so you go, well, then why would a guy like that go in the 5th round? I think it's his speed. He doesn't, he's got explosion to him. Don't get me wrong, but he looks like maybe a 4.6 guy. I don't know. We'll see. I hope he's faster than that. And if he does, Zach, he's probably going to be a lot higher draft pick than people realize. Byron, again, thank you, brother. Knowing that we will be drafting a running back and tight end in the draft, who is out the door that's currently on the roster? Well, since we technically, Zach, have not turned over to the new league year, Javonte Williams is gone. But that's kind of a foregone conclusion. I would think most fans have kind of realized that's the way the wind seems to be blowing, Zach. Who else could you see in that room to answer for Byron who might be expendable? Because we're literally talking about a who's who list, Zach, of undrafted guys and a 5th rounder.
I think, like you said there, it's easier to say that no one is really safe. They have a collection of auxiliary running backs, like a McLaughlin, who I could see sticking around. It seemed like Sean Payton wanted to make him the guy. Maybe Estime as an early down, spell back, a backup running back for the new starter. But other than that, that position is completely up for grabs. And I think all we know right now is, like you said, Javonte, who's an unrestricted free agent, is not going to be re-signed by Denver.
Yeah, we'll see. And I don't know for sure, Byron. I think it's expected the Broncos will be targeting running back and tight end in the draft. But a lot of that is contingent on what they do in free agency, because there's a reason that free agency comes a month and some change before the NFL draft. And that's because teams typically, especially if they have, salary cap space, they try to fill the most immediate pressing holes through the draft to free them up to try and be a lot more disciplined on the whole best player available thing. Because honestly, if Zach, Genty's gone, Loveland's gone, Warren's gone, guys like that, and the Broncos were to get to 20 and Gray Zabel's there and they don't take him, that I would have a hard time believing at that point in the draft that there was actually a better player available than Zabel. So that's why you fill the holes in free agency as best you can, because even though right now center doesn't seem to be a huge, desperate need, imagine what that offensive line could do for running backs, even if they don't upgrade them, with Zabel coming in there and being the pivot. I can only imagine. So that's why, there's so many moving factors when it comes to the draft. Free agency first. Don't fully expect the Broncos to draft a tight end or running back in the 1st round, even though we all kind of have our hearts set on it. I'm there with you guys.
And I think the running back room to me is the same as the tight end room, in that they're both expendable completely. There's no one player in there that the Broncos have to feature. There's no incumbent or holdover the Broncos are going to need to get on the field. That's up for grabs completely. And whether it's done through free agency or the draft, they're going to revamp those positions completely, Chad.
All right, let's where are we at? We're about 33 minutes. We're doing pretty good on time. Let me take a look here. Man, I've had a weird weekend coming back. I actually had a weird January. I get sick, maybe once, worst case scenario in a year, twice in a year. And I got sick of 3 different bugs in the month of January. So it's like I got to mix up what I'm taking on my supplements or something. But I brought a bug back from the Senior Bowl. The last day I was there, I started feeling a little throat thing, chest congestion. And so the last 2 days, man, I've been kind of like feels like you've got a dirty dish rag on your brain. You're just not quite yourself. That clarity plus your cough and you don't feel good. That's where I'm at. But Zach, has it been made matter of fact? Kellen Moore, new head coach of the New Orleans Saints.
It's funny that you said that, though, because the calendar is now February, and I've been getting sick the last like 2 or 3 February, so I'm bracing for impact. But I was just sick like a month and a half or so ago, so I'm hoping I, got that out of the way. Yeah, it's basically fait accompli now. They haven't announced a head coach, and they're obviously waiting on Kellen Moore, and he's going to be, I think, Chad, the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, because he's a little bit tied up right now, right? How are you feeling about things now, Zach? A week since the championship games with Chiefs, Eagles. I don't want to spend too much time of our pod tonight talking about it, but how are you feeling?
I truly feel, and not just because I'm rooting against the Chiefs, no bias, anything like that. I do believe this is the Eagles' game to win. I think they will come out on top. Both teams are a lot different schematically than they were the last time they played in the Super Bowl. And I think, obviously, Eagles have a better running game with Saquon. They have a better coverage unit that can help contain Patrick Mahomes. It's just the tricky aspect of the officiating crew, Chad. How are they going to stick their noses in and their flags and whistles into this one? That's always the wild card. But, gun in my head and my heart of hearts, I do think Philly wins this and saves the world at the same time.
From your lips to the ears of the football gods. By the way, Scott, that question you asked me, yes, on it, already up. Good looking out, big dog. Appreciate you. Okay, let me get back to the chat here, see what's on everybody's mind. By the way, shouts to Pearl. Great to see you tonight. Pearl Heater in the house. What's up? Weird January. We're sick. Happy it's February. Yeah, I am too. It was in more ways than one. It was a weird kind of, I don't know. Zach, I have been the publisher of Mile High Huddle for 10 years. All right. And that's a lot of Januaries. Okay. You start being able to kind of, and plus controlling massive social media accounts that reach hundreds of thousands of fans. You start kind of getting a finger on the pulse and you start kind of feeling like you can know what to expect and project. Last year, I'll tell you, this is, for whatever it's worth. Last year, before Bo Nix started to emerge, Broncos fans, even the first round pick being on a quarterback, notwithstanding, Broncos fans started kind of checking out. The number of people reading articles, the number of comments, the number of people in the live chats, the downloads, everything was just a little bit less. Then the weirdest thing happened. And then it would peak and valley, and that's the way it goes in a football season. But January, Zach, is normally a month for us at MHH, especially with how much we have specialized over the years in draft buzz and free agency buzz and just making sure no stone is unturned for Broncos country. January was really weird. It was about 2 days after the Broncos got bounced from Buffalo. All of a sudden, it was like, I don't know, 65% of the same people who were reading the articles in the chat, all that stuff commenting, they just like turned away. And I was talking to Nick about it yesterday. And I was like, what do you think the reason for that was? Like, even right now, the number of people we have in the chat, pretty solid number, but it's about, I don't know, 2/3 of what I would expect it to, or what it would have been last January, last February at this time, et cetera, et cetera. What do you suppose it is? You think fans just kind of Broncos country just kind of went, okay, we got our guy, exhale, wake me up when the draft gets here?
I also think positive doesn't really sell, Chad. We've talked about that off camera quite a bit, but it was also an anticlimactic loss. Even though they made the playoffs, it was a blowout, and that was it for them. And I know personally, I've spoken to people in real life, and I've seen plenty on Twitter that have said, I'm just checked out of football with the Chiefs just monopolizing the sport and reaching the Super Bowl year after year. Also, the Chiefs being the Broncos' biggest rival, Chad. It's a little demoralizing for a fan base, and I don't know if that's the reason why, but those are my theories.
It's funny you bring that up because that was one of the factors Nick floated as a possibility for why. Now, we're not talking about you guys. If you're in the room with us right now, this is not necessarily about you. You're the hardest core of the hardcore. You're as whack job about this whole thing as we are, and that's why we love you. That's why you're here with us. But I'd be curious to say, like, think about it. The people you know in your lives who are Broncos fans, how many of them are still reading the articles, wanting to stay on the news wire of what's happening with the team? I can tell you, in the 10 years I've been doing this, that just past January that ended 2 days ago was the least engaged Broncos country I've ever seen. And that's a good chunk of time, Zach, to establish a sample size. So I think as this month kind of marches on, February, you'll start seeing more and more people come back to the campfire, and it'll be like normal, but kind of weird. So here's a request from the Rock. Scott, do you have any tape on Arizona Wildcats prospect? Yeah, we saw him there. I don't know if you have any stuff already ready to go on the American team. Jonas Savaea, I think is how you say it. I'm not sure. They don't give you pronunciation guides at the Senior Bowl, but we'll see if we can find something on that for you, Ronk. Hang tight, homeboy. Okay, Zach, let me see. While we're kind of, I know what I want to talk to you about. So much has been made about the Broncos potentially kind of repeating history in the same way that they brought Bo's number one target at Oregon, Troy Franklin, to Denver, and bringing his brother, Tez Johnson. And so that was one of the guys that was quite clear Broncos fans and MHH wanted me to really eyeball while I was there. And the first day or so, when you're kind of getting acclimated to the way these practices are structured, because there's things happening at every corner and every little section of the field. Units are broken down. And I'm trying to help Scott out filming second camera. So, you're trying to prioritize where to draw your eye. It's literally impossible to watch every little thing happening. It's not the way it works. And so the first day I didn't spend a lot of time watching Tez, but day 2 and day 3, so Wednesday and Thursday, I watched him a lot. And dude, let me tell you something, Zach. He's small. He's 175 pounds, 5'9", whatever he is. He might even be shorter than that. I'll have to double check it. But that dude, Zach, let me tell you something. He's got great hands. He's fast, purportedly, according to Oregon, sub 4.3, okay? And he just gets open, dude, like separation on all those corners that were at the Senior Bowl. And these are experienced seniors, been playing 4 years plus at the highest levels. He was making mincemeat out of them. I became much more of a potential believer of Tez coming here and being something, adding to the kind of offensive pot of gumbo that Sean Payton's building after seeing him there for those couple of days.
Yeah, there's a lot to like, and when you tweeted, Chad, he just gets open, it's a good thing to take your word on because you were there watching it with your own eyeballs. It wasn't like a secondhand account. You were watching him get open. And it's one of his best parts of his game is his separation, but so was Jerry Jeudy's. It's not the end-all, be-all for receivers. He's also 5'9". As Scott points out, he's 156. So he'd be one of the lightest players in the NFL. You worried about how that's going to hold up with defenders careening into him every play. You wonder how much he can really bring to the table as a 5'9" receiver. He get mossed, figure of speech by other cornerbacks and other receivers. So as a gadget player, as a nostalgia story, I would support it, but he wouldn't be the answer to the Broncos' problems at receiver either, in my opinion.
I would agree, not like the answer, but I'm telling you, the amount of separation he creates, you're not going to see unless it's bad passing, which I don't anticipate Bo Nix suddenly becoming a woefully off-target, hospital ball throwing quarterback. He's not going to have too much of a problem. I mean, you're never going to expect him to get, being out-bodied by guys. Maybe we'll see how he does getting off the line of scrimmage against press. That wasn't something I paid a ton of attention to in these drills because they're not really trying to press him. They're trying to let him get a clean release so that they can see what these guys look like, both in coverage and in their routes. But he gets open, dude, and the separation's there. So if you've got accurate passing, you got guys thrown into windows, trying to avoid the big hits, he could be a nice complement. Is he a guy, Tiny Tez, to quote Scott, is he a guy that's going to come in and, solve every problem that the Broncos have currently? No, but I could see him being a late round flyer, like 5th, 6th round guy. In fact, I don't think the Broncos have a 5th this year. They just have like 3, 6, but he's interesting. And if he brings that speed, I mean, imagine him, Zach, imagine a little bit shorter and a little bit lighter Emmanuel Sanders. That's kind of what he reminded me of, just watching him, go against senior cornerbacks.
I was going to say in like a Tavon Austin role, there's always a package of plays for receivers like that, just to get the ball in his hands, Chad, and let his speed take over. But if the Broncos are drafting him just for familiarity, I would remind them of Troy Franklin, who was also Bo Nix's receiver, and the chemistry was way off in year one of the NFL. So, like you said, if it's an add-on and not the answer, fine. If it's the later rounds, fine. A dart throw, flyer, whatever, but just don't pin your hopes on Tez completely.
What do you think, Scott? Just like way too early, right? We still have combine, round 5 guy. He's getting drafted. He'll get drafted. Yeah. Will it be the Broncos? That's the question. The one thing I think about too, aside from some of the other downside risks we discussed tonight about the Broncos drafting Tez Johnson, is Bo Nix is their future guy, right? He's the guy they envision being in the gig for at least the next 10 to 12 years. What if you draft his literal brother, all right? Okay, adoptive brother, whatever you want, family member, okay? You draft him, it doesn't work out, and you got to not only go to Tez Johnson at some point and cut him, but you got to go to Bo Nix. Does that in any way jeopardize the the juju and the these are things maybe you don't want to worry about it. Maybe he's not good enough to risk that. Or maybe you see the evaluation and you're like, that's a non-issue. The kid's going to be a stud. I'm Sean Payton, and I can already carve out 3 or 4 different awesome ways I could use him day one. I'm just saying it's another piece of the puzzle, Zach.
It is, yeah, for sure. And I'm sure the Broncos, if they're interested in Tez, as they should be, they'll go to Bo Nix and get the full scouting report and get the real truth on him, the things that he could bring to the table, the things that are his drawbacks. And if he's a viable asset to the Broncos, I think they could pull the trigger, just like you said, Chad, in the middle rounds, maybe with one of their 6th-round draft picks.
For what it's worth, NFL Mock Draft Database, which is kind of a cornerstone for projecting draft stock, nothing is really Bible in the draft. So much of it is just speculation, but they have him as a 3rd rounder, Tez Johnson. But I concur with Scott. I think his size will knock him to day 3. Where on day 3, it just kind of depends on how the class stacks up. But I came out of there I went in being kind of dismissive, thinking we kind of did that with Troy Franklin. I don't know, he's small, this other guy, Tez. I came out of there going, no, dude, if the Broncos drafted him, I would actually be quite excited. Beyond the brother storylines, what he brings to the table as a receiver, I would be stoked to see what magic they could create. Byron, again, dude, going off tonight. Thank you, pal. You the man. Says Tez is a great athlete, but are we trying to make this the Oregon Broncos, or can we get a player with more meat on the bone that can truly ignite this offense? Yeah, exactly. That's the point. I'll quote Zach here, that he's not going to solve your problems. He's too limited with that size deficiencies. Tiny Tez, that's a thing. He would be, we're talking about the gumbo. He'd be some of that seasoning that you're like, what is that? And the chef's like, I'm not going to tell you. That's a secret. That's what Tez could be. Is he like star of the show? No, dude, that's the shrimp. That's the sausage. And that's what the Broncos need to find right now, Zach.
Yeah, it's like having Marvin Mims by himself. That's not really the answer, but neither is Tez Johnson by himself. But you put Marvin Mims and Tez Johnson together in the same offense. You add in Courtland Sutton, you add in a little Troy Franklin, maybe a little Devon Vele. Then you have something there. Then you have a full recipe. So again, yeah, Byron, we all want the stud, elite, no doubt, wide receiver 1. But they want to wait a little bit and take another dart throw. I have no problem with Tez. You're muted.
Thank you again, Big Dog. Appreciate you, Byron. This is the 2-minute warning for any burning topics, questions, supers. Get them in the chat, and we'll grab before we dip on out of here. I'm just taking one more spin through. As soon as I saw the question from Ronk about Rizzy, yeah. So this is some other news that has popped over the weekend. We saw it. I mean, I think, Zach, this was as soon as the Saints fired Dennis Allen, Sean Payton probably knew he was going to fire Ben Kotwica because Darren Rizzi was going to be available. And the only thing that could probably forestall Payton's plan from coming to fruition and getting Rizzi in here as the special teams coordinator would have been if the Saints hired him as the actual head coach, because he served as the interim in the wake of Dennis Allen, but it's looking like that gig is indeed going to go to Kellen Moore. And so over the weekend, the report coming from, I think it was, yes, indeed, Ian Rappaport, quote, as the Saints zero in on Kellen Moore, slated to have another conversation with him after the Super Bowl, interim coach Darren Rizzi is likely to become the new Broncos special teams coordinator, sources say. Back with Sean Payton and an important hire, Zach.
It would be a big get. This is another coach where he's not quite head coaching material, even interim head coaching material, but he's a damn good special teams coordinator. Very high energy guy from what I've seen, the videos and clips on Twitter. Players respect him. They play hard for him. And he has familiarity with Sean Payton. And we all know, Chad, how much that means to Sean.
Man, there was some weird stuff going on with just kind of how the special teams ducks, you know, when you talk about ducks in a row, how the ducks kind of fell, because that massive special teams breakdown with Alex Forsythe just laying down and the Chiefs blocking the would-be game-winning field goal attempt as time expired at Arrowhead. 2 days later, Mike Westhoff steps down as basically the special teams are / assistant head coach, but it was explained away at the time as a health and age-related thing, some kind of health thing. Zach, in fact, you're the one that had the news report for us at MHH.
Yeah.
But we didn't really connect the dots on those two things because we take it for what it's worth. They're saying it's a health issue. You look at him, he's old. You know, okay, adds up. But then immediately firing Kotwicka when the season ends. That block kick really pissed Sean Payton off. Like that was a change agent. And Rizzi's going to come in. And what's crazy, Zach, is the Broncos special teams are vastly improved under Kotwicka and Westhoff. But you cannot have a lapse like that. Chips are down, critical division rivalry game. And some head not rolling. Ended up being two heads rolling. Now, I'm not saying the Broncos, Zach, were lying and that Mike Westhoff didn't have concerns, but I'll put it this way. I bet you if that kick goes through the uprights and the Broncos win, Bo Nix drives them back, gets them in the field goal range, chip shot, boom. I bet you he's coaching through whatever that health issue is. I bet you Ben Kotwick is still your special teams coordinator, even though Darren Rizzi's suddenly hitting the market.
We were all so caught up from the ending to that Chiefs game. We didn't put 2 and 2 together, but apparently Westhoff advised the Jets about Chris Bangio, who they hired away from Denver to be the new special teams coordinator. So there was a lot of moving parts to that, Chad. You mentioned the Chiefs game. There was also another divisional game, very high-stake game against the Chargers a few weeks later, the Tremont Smith kick-catch interference that allowed them to go down and get points. It changed the whole outcome of the game and I think contributed to Kotwicka's firing. Hopefully Rizzi can come in and establish some sort of continuity on that front.
Ronk, thank you, brother. Much love and respect. Great show tonight, Chad and Zach on the Mile High Huddle podcast. Go Bo Broncos. Thank you, bro. Before we get to the last few messages that Zach's going to have for you, I've got one myself, and that is those of you who follow what we do, staying on top of not just the live stream pods, but the articles and the memes and everything on Facebook, make sure, Eric Flynn, I see you, big dog. Great to see you. Make sure you go to the Mile High Huddle Facebook page, the main MHH, 113,000 followers or whatever, and make it a favorite. Okay, there's a little button you can click on the 3-dot menu thing. Click it, make MHH a favorite. Otherwise, you won't see it in your news feed. So a lot of questions lately, Zach, the last couple months, basically since November, why people aren't getting notified on Facebook, why they're having to search around to find the streams. A lot of algorithmic shifts, but bottom line, guys, we need you in vast numbers. Like if you're within the sound of my voice, either in the moment or on demand listening to this, please open up Facebook, go to the Mile High Huddle page and make it a favorite so that you're seeing this stuff hit your feed every time we post. Now, with that being said, thank you in advance. We got a few messages for you.
Another tremendous installment, as always, of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please give us a follow on X at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account on X at Mile High Huddle. Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch like we're rocking each and every single podcast, check out mhhmerch.com and get you some. If you haven't done so yet, drop us a like at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. Also, be sure to favorite the page as Chad just talked about there. On Instagram, you can find us at mile_high_huddle. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your football pre-save 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please, very important that you do this, that you subscribe, that you like, that you share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
Hey, again, shouts to Eric Flynn jumping in at the 11th hour, throwing down some stars. Thank you, big dog. And also, before we dip, I want to give a special shout out to one of our friends and members of the MHH hashtag State of Being community, all right, south of the border. Raul, this was waiting for me when I got back from the Senior Bowl. Then Morton said to Elway, it's the Craig Morton book, and it's interesting. I haven't cracked it open yet. There's also comes with like a little, this kind of dates it, little like laser CD thing for your computer back in the day when people did that. But another one of these treasures, gifts bequeathed to MHH that I will always treasure and add to the Broncos Book Club collection. And here in the next couple of weeks, when we launch the MHH YouTube membership, Broncos Book Club is coming back. So get your eyes checked. Make sure your prescription's up to date. So we're going to be doing some reading. It's going to be a lot of fun, and can't wait. But Raul, thank you, big dog. Much love and respect. And a shout out here also, special Mile High salute to the Super Chat superstars and Facebook supporters helping us keep the lights on, like David Youngkin, Max Rio, the Papa Bear, David McElrath, the Ronk, the Duchess, 2 top rope, extremely generous Super Chats. David Youngkin multiple times, Byron Lewis multiple times, really going off tonight. 1, 2, 3, 4 different supers. You the man, brother. Thank you. Eric Flynn as well. Love you guys. We'll be back, Zach and I, tomorrow night. Can't wait. Broncos have 5 coaching vacancies, by the way. So I'm guessing here in the next week or so, we're going to start seeing some of those dominoes fall. Keep it here, locked with MHH. Don't forget Facebook. Even if you're not living on Facebook, guys, you have Facebook account, go find the MHH Facebook page and make it a favorite. I'll drop the link in the chat just in case, but we need you guys. We need your help on that. Thank you.
Have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, and as always, go Broncos.